Welcome to With You Podcast,
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
And we're coming right back at you. I wanted to kind of do a radio voice. Here we are, WTTW, window to the world. I don't know. I always joke around.
Got to try something.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
Okay.
This is really the first time we've talked to each other today.
I think you lead with that like every week that we talk.
Well, every time we record.
Hey, I haven't seen you. Because usually it's been busy, but we've talked.
You were gone all weekend.
I know.
Do you want to tell people what you were doing?
Yeah, well,
because I'd like to know.
You'd like to know.
Where were you this weekend?
I was teaching my first doula training workshop.
Woo! So cool.
Yeah, it was really fun.
So you're training the future trainers.
I'm training the future doulas.
Future doulas.
Maybe someday they'll also be a trainer, but right now they're fresh new doulas ready to go support people in birth, and
that's really
excited about making a difference.
It was a lot though. I mean, it was 2.5 days of who knows.
I know, and I know you do a lot of like marathon teaching.
Yeah,
mine is usually in little short bursts, so this was a lot of endurance.
Yeah, it's so cool to see though, because you're really kind of stepping into teaching, which I think is interesting. When you were at Wheaton, your first degree focus was teaching.
Yeah.
And you kind of have come full circle in 40
years. I was like, I don't want to do that.
But those were teenagers you didn't want to teach.
Yeah. I kind of changed my mind when I did my teaching observation that you do in the process, and went to a local high school. And I think I was trying to do secondary ed with an emphasis in speech and English, and watched what the teacher had to do, like just doing the same thing over and over 7 times every day.
Yeah.
And I was just like, nope.
I'm not going to do that. And now look at you. You're back to where you're developing a curriculum, teaching.
Yeah.
I wish there was one student that was in your class. We won't name any names, but this person also took a class from me, and I am dying to know, like, who did they like better as a teacher?
This is not a competition.
It kind of is.
We're different kinds of teachers.
We are very different kinds of teachers.
Yeah.
And I was teaching her
but she enjoyed both of our, Are you doubting me now?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
People always, what we do get requests for.
What's that?
People say they want us to have an argument.
No.
They want to learn how we fight. I don't think this is going to happen.
We fight when we get stubborn about positions that we take. I think that's the most common thing of, like, it starts out kind of funny.
But see, what I'm trying to say is we're not going to fight.
Oh, I thought that was a bid to play.
No, we haven't even talked about what our subject is going to be about.
Fighting?
No. No, it just felt like you were wanting to go there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who's the better teacher?
Yeah, I mean, we can't decide that. We're both biased, and I do think you're an amazing teacher, but I really want to know who's better. All right.
Well, you're not invited to my doula workshop, so
and
you won't find out.
You're not invited to my class.
No.
So we will keep that separate.
It's best that way. Actually, that's not a bad lead-in.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what are we talking about today?
And honestly, what inspired me to want to talk about this is the experience of being gone over the weekend and working all day, teaching for a 9-hour day, and coming home and finding that my son and my husband had made a really nice dinner, was ready to be served, and there was music on, and the kitchen was clean, the candles were lit, and I was like, is this what it's like for people who work all day and come home and somebody else has cleaned the house and made dinner, gone grocery shopping? I was shook.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while, let's not get used to that.
Well, maybe this is going to turn into our fight because what I wanted to talk about was just that, like, how do people sort out who does what in their relationships? Like, that's a huge point of disagreement for a lot of people, like just division of labor, figuring out who does the household tasks.
Yeah, I know we do. When we do premarital counseling with couples, we go through that kind of prepare and enrich, and it's like, what do you expect your partner to do? What do you expect to do? What did you see in your family growing up? And I think everybody lies in their premarital because they're like, it's the ideal of what they think it should be.
Right.
And then the messiness of life comes in.
Right.
And I think there's tension around that. And I think there's strong gender things. I mean, let's start out with us. Like when we were,
well, maybe we should start
we
out
are
from.
going to fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Okay,
here we go. No, because I think we're in a really good place about this. But I think in our first 5 years of marriage, it was a struggle.
Yeah, and we had different assumptions.
Right.
It was really, and it was kind of tradition. We both grew up traditional gender roles.
Yeah.
And so there was expectation that you, I mean, starting out, there was expectation that you thought I knew how a car worked, for instance. And I knew where the gas went most of the time.
Or that you could pay the bills or.
Yeah, no, in our first few years of marriage, you were expecting me to be able to manage the finances. And I paid bills like when that little red message came in the mail,
It says overdue.
Yeah, pay or we're going to cut off the power. It's like, oh, well, that's the most important bill to pay right now, which was a different way than maybe
alarming.
You're growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think we did both grow up in families that had very traditional roles as far as division of labor, So I think we thought we had the same expectation for sort of following that. I think what I didn't expect is how much I didn't like that.
Yeah. It's like, yes, you're in agreement. It's like, no.
Wait, why am I ironing all your shirts while you're watching football? And I don't even buy clothes that I have to iron. Wait a minute.
This isn't right. I know. And you had a hard act to follow because my college roommate did ironing for me and taught me how to properly vacuum a carpet. And he was amazing.
I know. You've always found a way to have people around you that like to do like the work that you don't like to do.
I know. I feel a little bit like I'm Tom Sawyer. It's like, hey, this is really fun painting the fence. You want to do that for me? Sure.
Or you just do it wrong. Like I think you tried vacuuming your apartment and your roommate's like, oh no, that's not going to work. Let me do it for you.
Like baseball field. You know how the
lines
nap goes one way and then comes back the other.
That's beyond me.
Yeah, it was
well, and then I didn't meet up to your roommate standards because I've never I've never vacuumed a house like that.
And part of it's caring though, like how much I think there's the gender piece of it. So for me growing up, it was traditional gender roles, although my mom did the finances. She was really
It's funny because my mom did the
numbers.
finances too, but somehow I thought it should be you.
Well, neither one of us really are friends with numbers.
Yeah, we're not.
We're
words
really
people.
liberal arts, words, emotions. Like, give me a good messy emotion, and I can organize that. But like, how much money we have in the checkbook?
I don't know.
If they're like, hey, you should probably try another credit card. I'm well, that one's empty. I'm an experiential learner, and organizer. But yeah, I think both of us had mothers that were the financial people. And so I assumed that.
Right.
You assumed that, and then you didn't like it.
Yeah. It's not my strong suit. So I was hoping maybe it would be yours, but
Well, and then when you found out I ran like in the boards I'm on and the work I do, I have to run a budget.
you have to do a lot of things that you never thought you'd be good at or even competent at.
Well, and you know what I do? I just hire really good people.
I know.
around me.
That's what I'm saying. Like one of your gifts is finding all the people around you who do a good job with the stuff you don't want to do.
Well, I don't think it's what I don't want to do. I think it's I know my skill set. I know my lane. And so then I find people that complement my lane.
Yeah.
But I think it's different in marriage. That's not what we're looking for when we're
No.
kind of committing to a relationship with each
No.
other, is like, oh, this is my lane and this is how I complement
No.
Tara in her lane. It's like, oh, I love you. And we
No,
get
well,
married for
because
that
we
reason.
have in a marriage we have a shared purpose, and like it's like we're working for the same company. We don't have really defined roles, and we have to get certain tasks done.
Yeah.
That like aren't clearly in one lane or the other. So, like with our mothers, they both cooked and
Yep.
like did all the meals, did all the shopping, did all the laundry, like that. Pretty naturally, we just fell into that.
Yeah. And what's the word for that now in contemporary culture?
Trad wife,
Trad wives. They were total trad wives.
the traditional. Yeah.
Kind of stay at home mom. Yeah, my mom worked when she was 19 and right up to when she had me. And then after that,
Yeah, she did a lot of work
did a
later
lot
as
of
and
work.
a lot of volunteering. And my mom worked more once the kids were older too. She had been a nurse and then went back to that when we were older. So they weren't completely stay at home, like wearing pearls and cooking food and doing nothing else.
No.
They were working, but
But
they're
they were the trad wives, right?
well,
Like, because
yeah.
my mom did
Okay,
tons
but
of.
let's not use that word because I think these days it has other meanings we're
we
not
have no
aware of.
idea. Okay.
We don't want to.
My mom was Little House on the Prairie. How about that? For a
Okay.
reference that no one will know.
Oh, it's coming back.
Is it?
Oh yeah, it's coming back.
All
Yeah,
right. What was that girl's name?
Laura Ingalls
Laura.
Wilder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we did canning. I grew up canning that we like during the harvest. I don't know if it was a harvest, but our backyard garden.
You didn't
we
have
would
a farm.
We'd pick all the stuff out of the backyard garden, and then we would go to the farmer's market and vegetables and tomatoes, and that would be then what we'd use to cook with. And so that was growing up, and I got to help with sterilizing the
The
jars.
jars. Yep.
So that's interesting now, given the roles that we have now, kind of fast forward of what I was able to do and what mom had me do has kind of continued on. But cooking, not my thing.
No, I think you made brownies one time when we were dating and out of a box, and you even got that wrong. Like you put in, like instead of I don't know, instead of sugar,
like
you put salt or something.
No, it was, it was a visual cue issue. It was like a tablespoon of baking soda, and I think I put in a cup because I was like, wow, you have to use a whole box for brownies.
Oh my word.
And it was it was a doorstop.
So I'm happy to do the cooking. I really am. But yeah, and our dads were the primary breadwinners. They were the primary workers.
Yeah.
So I think we just both assumed that was kind of how it was going to play out.
Yeah, that was the model of ours, and we didn't think about it or necessarily talk about it.
No,
It was
I
just
don't think
kinda-
we did. And maybe once we started kind of becoming independent, living it, away from our parents, we might have been like, oh, I thought you were going to take out the trash. Like just assuming like, that's what my dad did. Why aren't you taking out the trash every night or whatever? Like we just kind of have this framework. So how do you think most people work that out? Like, is it ever agreed upon, do you think, before?
Yeah, I think it just falls naturally. So, I mean, even with us, like we had that template, but then with grad school, you supported our family for the first 5 years, really, in terms of working until kids. And so I think there's that early marriage time where it's a little more fluid and you're falling into it. And then if and when you have children, that shakes it all up again. And I think that's when it gets contentious, and you have to really talk it out and figure out who's going to do what, because you have limited time, limited energy. But I think before then, there's a bit of
Right, because if we were both, you were in grad school, I was working on the weekends, be like, okay, who's going to clean the toilet this weekend?
Yeah.
Or, and we'd just
It'd be
sort of go
taking
back and
turns.
forth.
And then when we started to have kids, it became more like, okay, now I have a job, a career, I'm working, you're popping babies out.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, but then there's also a lot more tasks. So I think people can start to feel burdened and resentful if it feels like the balance is off.
Well, and I do think it's the balance does get off, and on gender. I mean, we're joking around a little bit about what I do and what I don't do, but you, especially when we had kids, you did the lion's share of everything at home, and it wasn't 50-50 at all.
No, I'll agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. And I think that's common where there's a sense of, I go off to work when I come home. It's a rest, that kind of, what castle? What's the
the king of the castle?
King of the castle.
Yeah, like kind of hearkening back to that etiquette book we read in a couple episodes ago. There were they're funny now, but the advice to housewives, if you can't see us, I'm doing air quotes. But advice to wives at home when the man was out working was, when he comes home, make sure the house is quiet, the children are tidy, he can smell dinner cooking in the oven, have his slippers ready and his pipe, and bring him the newspaper. Like literally, that was what was the advice for taking care. He's been working all day, so you've not been doing anything.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's an interesting thing of assuming certain things are like hard work and certain things are it just has to happen, and it's not seen as work. It's just life.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to a lot of tension in relationships of, wow. And I think about it more, especially since COVID, of you don't get away from work. So there's not like going off to work, and everything bleeds together. And I think that has helped people kind of go, oh, wait, there's a lot of things that we need to do. And how are we teaming up? There's also a weird thing. I think our expectations that we had for each other, like your expectation of what a man should be and what he should do.
Did I?
Yeah, I think you had a more traditional view.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure what that means, though.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we didn't talk about that, but taking care of the car, doing the lawn.
Well, that's kind of the
those
division
type of things.
Yeah.
There was like this: if you're a good husband, if you're a good kind of guy, David, this will be what you did. But it's not overt. It was very much implicit.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's probably fair, because in my upbringing, my siblings and I had 3 brothers and there were 2 girls, and the division of our chores were much more like boys did the outside work. They mowed the lawn. I never mowed a lawn a day in my life. Yeah. My brothers always mowed the lawn and took care of the pool or whatever. My sister and I did the vacuuming and the cleaning the bathroom and kitchen work.
Yep.
So it was pretty divided by gender.
Yeah.
So you just kind of fall into that. And then there's like a reshuffling of like, okay, I came in with all these assumptions.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I thought it was the right way. It's just like default.
Yeah, that's what you knew.
And then now what do we do? Like, how do we sort out what feels right for you? What feels fair?
Well, and I think for couples, so this is where systems theory fits in nice, right? We have a balance. We have just what we know and the balance. And it's only when there's a certain level of frustration that leads to either doubling down and digging hard into that pattern, or going, oh, let's look at things. And I think we've always been a couple of like, let's look at things. Oh, this isn't really working.
Well, sometimes we've had those sort of like where we both hit the wall and we're like, okay, we're having a disagreement about how this is supposed to work. Yeah. And one of us maybe presents our case, and then the other one's like, I kind of hear you, but I kind of can't change that right now. Yeah. Or, whatever stage of life, I can't be there for you that way right now.
Or I want that for you, but we're going to have to find somebody for you.
Right. Yeah. You're not going to be the plumber. So I think there's that sort of figuring out. But I think most couples, I would imagine, I don't know how it works for most people, but I think we found sort of a balance after I don't know how many years.
And I think it's skill set based. I mean, we've worked on that, and it's the same thing in terms of decision making. Like, who has the most investment in this who has the most skills. And
Yeah, somewhat.
When we get into a lot,
But
okay,
sometimes, no, I mean, sometimes we both feel like, okay, we're equal in skills on doing the dishes, but
yeah,
we just have to choose. Like one
yeah,
of
and
us
I
is going to
enjoy
do that.
it.
Well, this is my favorite way that this has worked out because clearly I'm the one who likes to make the meals. I do not like to clean up after myself in the kitchen.
Yeah,
And for years, I think you just weren't available for that.
no,
You were studying and you were whatever. But we've gotten into a place where you always clean the kitchen. You always,
yeah,
and I thought about that too because you made that meal after my day of teaching. But tonight I just came home from another meeting and the dishwasher's running and I love that sound. Like, and it
yeah,
just reminded me like, that's nice. I never have to ask you to do that because at some probably the earlier half of our marriage, you were willing, you were always willing to do things, but I always had to ask and be very specific about what, when,
yeah.
why, you know.
Well, and I think you're right. It was a combination of family we grew up in, but
Yeah.
it was also the amount of stress. Like, what margin do you have?
Yeah.
And we were in a stage of life where there was very little margin. So
Yeah.
without like, this is what
Yeah.
I need. And I think couples get into a fantasy of like, you'll just know what I need.
Oh, yeah. I think most women, especially, are really want their husband to be a mind reader and
Yeah.
just like if, more meaningful if you know my needs and meet them before I have to ask.
You know, what's worse than that
What's
is
that?
where you think you can read I can read your mind, and it's completely wrong.
Yeah, that
And it's
is
a
worse.
double. It's a double whammy because it's just
Definitely
like
worse.
you can't read my mind, and you did the opposite thing. You dum dum. We've had a
Yeah.
few of those
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah.
But it's unreasonable, and yet for some reason there's this fantasy like if you knew me enough, you would know exactly what I need, which isn't great relationships.
I
And
know. I think it's just one of those enduring fantasies about what marriage is, or even just any romantic relationship, that that person just will get me. They'll know me so well that they'll just, they'll meet my need. And that's kind of a wrong fantasy of any relationship. They'll meet my need,
yeah,
and we do want to care for each other and meet each other's needs. But once I let go of that expectation, everything got a lot better for both of us.
yeah. And it was like I was just like, let me know. And it's not romantic. It's like then I can actually do exactly what is pleasing for you.
Yeah, but you're still going to hear from people who are like, yeah, but if like a woman has to circle exactly what she wants for Christmas and he just buys it out of the same checking account, it's like,
Yeah, but we have friends that have been married like over 50 years, and they don't even circle. They just buy the gifts for themselves, wrap it up, and open
I
it up
know
from each
that's
other.
that's a long-term marriage where you're like, I'm just gonna circumvent this whole
But
conversation.
I think there's something to that of like, okay, is this a hill to die on? Like, what is it here, and how do we show affection? How do we be open for influence? And when we're talking about chores, it's all right. There's not a right or wrong of who does the yard work. We have friends down the street where the wife just loves it. She loves getting her hands in the dirt, and he loves
She's out mowing the
washing
lawn
and doing doing the laundry. And it's reversed from gender roles, but it's not because any of that is gendered specifically. It's
No.
what their skill sets are, what they enjoy, and can you be open in finding that? I think we've done a pretty good job, except for the things that neither one of us like.
I know,
And
that's the
the
struggle.
problem. Because then
Yeah.
we both are like, well, I don't want to do it. I
Been a
don't want
while
to do it.
since the bathroom was clean.
And then it's just who can outlast. It's kind of like a survivor moment.
Oh, you just admitted that. You just admitted that.
I'm a stubborn man.
You can tolerate a
Yeah.
lot more dirt than I can.
I can, and just kind of outlast of my my tolerance for chaos, partly because of my career choice is a good fit. So, but that's not fair, right? Really. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah.
actually what I do, and I'm confessing here to I guess you and
Just me. It's
everybody.
just you and me, David. It's
Okay,
just
well,
you and
honey,
me.
I acknowledge that. I use that, and it's not the right
Yeah.
thing. It's
I
hard for me
mean,
to say because it's
I know,
so
I can
easy.
see it's really hard for you to say that. But yeah, I don't think it's something that ever gets completely solved in a relationship.
Yeah.
Like the balance in who feels like they're doing more, whether it's emotionally towards the relationship or household tasks. Like, I don't think that's something that ever is 100%. Everybody's 100% happy.
No,
When
and
you think
I think that's true.
somebody's probably doing more than they want and somebody's probably getting away with something and it could shift. Like,
But I think that's what I was going to say to that. Of it's going to be imbalanced. Is it imbalanced over a lifetime together, or over a decade? Right? Like there's going to be seasons when there's going to be imbalance, and like now. My career, there's a little more flexibility in it, so I can be home and do certain things. You're getting much busier in your career, and so it's just an easy flex to, yeah, some of the things that I didn't do now, it's fun to do. And I like we've talked before, I like putting together furniture, and
oh, yeah. Yeah.
I do like ironing. It's
That's weird.
I know. I can let's edit that out. But like doing the dishes, and
Yeah.
I really don't care about laundry.
You seem to find that, yeah, you don't do the laundry.
No.
I think I could count on one hand the times in 32 years that you've put
Yeah.
anything in the washing machine.
Do we? How does that happen anyway? Like
What?
clothes
How
just
does it work?
miraculously
Yeah,
get clean.
they just show up cleaned and folded and back in your
It's
on your
it's
shelves,
so
and your
nice.
toothpaste just gets magically like a fresh one comes when the old one's done.
I know we
And
must have this little house elf or
yeah,
something that kind
hello,
of.
hello, it's me. I'm the elf. It's me.
Although we do find ways of navigating, because like when you send me to the grocery store, I know even saying that you send me to the grocery store, but when I go grocery shopping, it's a
Which,
very
let's just say, it's usually very specifically task oriented for something I forgot. And if I send you off with like a list of 3 things I want you to bring back, the kids all laugh as you go out the door going, let's see what he comes back with.
I
Because,
know, because it's a store with just magical things that
yeah,
it'd be like, oh, we need more paprika, and it wasn't on the list.
no, we have a lot of paprika from our Hungarian friends,
know,
which
we
we're
probably
very grateful
Yeah,
for.
we never need to buy paprika, but
No.
I do get a little bit of shiny moments in the
You have
grocery
come back
store.
with some very unique finds.
Sometimes it's pretty cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
but sometimes I come back with things and not one of them are on the list. So I go out with a list
Yeah.
and I come back with something completely
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. But I'm glad you're willing.
Yeah, and then I go back again
Yeah.
and get the list, but
Yeah. Another thing we've shifted that I think is funny is driving. Like
yeah.
in my whole growing up, I mean, my mom drove herself to whatever she had to do by herself. But if the whole family was in the car, my dad always drove, like always. And I think same in your family.
Yeah, same in my family. I can, unless if Dad was at work, then Mom would drive us around, and
Yeah.
and that would usually be when we'd have the sex talk. Was Mom driving? But
That's a whole other podcast,
That's
which
right.
we might tackle someday.
Yeah, I think we should talk about how do parents
let's
talk
call
to
it.
kids
No,
about-
never mind.
What would you like to
I
call
was
it?
just talking about how you talk about it in the car.
Oh, yeah.
But then the title, that didn't sound good. So anyway,
But yes, my father drove on long trips.
Yeah.
He loved. I come from a long line of guys that like cars. And
yeah. But then we did the same. We just assumed every time we drove somewhere together, you drove.
yeah.
And I really liked driving. And it wasn't until,
And you're
I don't know.
you're a good driver.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, when we look at our crash record and our speeding ticket record and other violations,
Yeah, there's evidence behind that.
It depends on if it's the most, then I win. If it's who's the safest, it's you win.
Okay.
But yeah, up until
Yeah.
recently, probably
Now I
the
drive
last-
you everywhere.
Oh, I love it. I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner.
Yeah. Well, you
but
kind of fought it at first because it seemed weird to us. Like,
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just like that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed driving.
That's the man.
Yeah, well, and like when my first job, I think we've talked about this on previous podcasts of our odd jobs. I drove a trolley for 8 hours a day. So I was just driving in a circle for 8 hours a day. It was just like natural.
Well, and you could parallel park that trolley.
Yeah,
That's pretty impressive.
35-foot vehicle I could parallel park without knocking little balls off of cones.
Yeah. So when I drive and if I have to parallel park, I get out of the car and let you do it.
We have done that in Chicago. So
yeah.
I would want people to picture
There's people
this.
waiting behind me. I'm like, I'm not doing this.
So we stop in the middle of the road, jump out of the car, switch seats.
Yeah.
And I parallel park for us.
Yeah.
But,
like a boss.
yeah. But that shifted. And it was, just we realized, oh, you enjoy it. And
Yeah. Why? You can just sit and play on your phone while I drive you places.
Yeah. I love that. It's like, wow, this is my own personal
Yeah.
Uber.
And then I don't have to tell you, oh, you're going this way? Why are you going that way?
I know, because that would happen.
That would happen.
And you would make suggestions, and then out of my stubbornness,
I know.
we would go a whole different way.
Yep, that
and then
happened.
the kids would say, where are we going? And what would be my response?
We always said to the kids, whenever they asked that question, like, where are we going now? We're always going home.
There might be other stops, but we're always going home.
Yeah.
They stopped asking where we're going.
Yeah. Or if we were in two cars or we had been somewhere else.
No, we don't want to.
No?
Okay. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well,
you started.
We tried to tell the kids we weren't racing to see who got home first, but they knew better.
Oh, yeah. And then we would accuse each other in the driveway of who was speeding, because whoever got there first, we made the assumption they must have cheated.
Yeah.
That probably wasn't great modeling
that's
for
where
our children.
Firstborn competitiveness comes out.
Yeah, it does. What other tasks, what other chores? I mean, because it's really, for us, the big issues were finance, kind of cooking, cleaning.
Well, there's the typical household tasks. When the kids were super busy with their sports and stuff, there was a lot to be done with getting them places. And that was mostly on me, but you coached them in almost everything. So that was also nice. If you were coaching, you were driving them places. Because there was a period of our life where I felt like I lived in a minivan. Like my whole life was in the minivan.
Yeah.
So when you were coaching and taking loads of kids places, that was helpful.
That was.
I
good.
was washing the uniforms and making the snacks,
But I think we found a balance, and it's how do you hold loosely to these things, and how do you have a conversation of if you're feeling embittered or put upon. I think that's when there needs to be a conversation of like, what are we doing here?
And we had those conversations, and I think when we hit that impasse of like, I feel like I need help, but there's no way for you to help me in the way that I'm needing it right now.
Yeah.
I would just always think, okay, what's the big picture here? Is David trying to make me feel burdened and untaken care of? No. Like, do I think he loves me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I think we're trying to work it out as a couple? Like, we're trying to have a, somewhat balanced division of things? Yeah. So I feel like that always helped me not make that the biggest thing. If like we're both trying, we're both doing our best, we both have a lot to do.
Yeah.
If I get hung up on, well, I'm doing more than you. I mean, there's a couple times I might have written lists to show you just how much more I was doing, but but then it wasn't like, okay, now I'm going to harp on this. It's just like, you know what? Just know that neither of us is sitting putting our feet up.
Yeah.
And if we look at the bottom line of is anybody trying to hurt somebody else? No.
Yeah. And no. I think that big picture, it was really helpful.
Yeah.
And the idea of like, we're in this together and how are we accomplishing, open to influence, like appreciating all that you do. And so how am I carrying my part? It might look different. It might be balanced different, but what's my part? What's your part as we do this? And it'll change. It can change over time.
Yeah. And it's making me think of our friend Gary Chapman, Dr. Gary Chapman, who says like the best thing you can do, and this was true for him when his marriage kind of hit a spot where they were struggling at the very beginning. And he said he just needed to say to his wife and couples should say this to each other at the beginning of the day. Like, what's one thing I could do to make your day better today? Or what's one way I could help you today? Sometimes even just being asked that question,
Yeah.
being seen that way is enough. Even if that person can't take your whole chore list, but they're just seeing that, like, hey, can I just take one thing? Can I go pick that thing up from the grocery store? That's going a long way of just seeing the other. And
And it can change the relational dynamic. I want to caution people because, and I think guys especially think instrumentally of like, if I do that, then you'll respond differently. That's a transactional, like I'm doing this for an ulterior motive rather than, oh, I see. So I'm going to be open and I want to do this regardless of the outcome, which is the kind
that's
of
a good
second
point.
thing
Or
for me.
regardless of the returned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The return on investment,
Right.
ROI.
Right.
Right. Like I think we live in that space of if I do this, I expect something to come back or I expect a thank you, or it's just like, you want me to thank you? I do all of these things and you do one thing. You want me to thank you? Right. It's a little not logical. And I
Yeah.
can see fights happening that
Oh,
way.
yeah.
So
I think we've been there before.
but I think you talk about big picture. And for me, it's realizing I am doing this because I want to do this and love you well, not to get something out of it. That shifts it for me. I think a lot of times when we had fights, when we struggled, it was, well, I'm doing this, right? With the implicit piece
Because
of that
I'm
being,
doing this, you should do this.
there's the you should piece on the end of it
Yeah.
and it probably goes both ways, but I can only kind of talk about kind of being a guy and thinking about it that way of like, well, if I do this, that should happen.
It's the economics of it. And
Right. And I don't think that's healthy for a relationship. It didn't work out. It didn't work out well for me.
I don't think,
But it's that's been a shift for us. We talk about this a lot of times of it, when we let go of the outcome and think about the process, how am I going to do this? And we'll see what happens. There's kind of a curiosity and a surprise, open for surprise of something happens. And I think about Dr. Chapman. He was like, it was like 18 months of serving, like shifting his heart to serve and not asking for anything, not seeking any different outcome. And things eventually changed. There's no guarantee of that. But if we live in that space of, oh, this is how I want to be, we talk about it in family therapy from a differentiated space of like, I'm going to enter in and do this regardless. I'm going to love you and respond this way. Not to get something, not because you're doing anything. If both partners are doing that, then man, something beautiful happens.
Yeah.
It's hard when it's only one partner.
Right. I know. I think most people, when they talk about love or think about love, they think of how they want to be loved and how they want to be treated and be served. But it's hard when you flip it just to think, how would you love somebody with your actions, thinking you might not get what you're hoping for in return?
Yeah, unrequited.
And can you still do that? And that's the way you're just going to love them. That's a hard ask.
And I think it's easier when there's been years of trust. I think that's why it's different now for us later on in life, when we're newly married.
Because we have a lot of safety with each other.
There's not as much built up. And so the skill set in an early relationship is, how do we build trust? How do we demonstrate trustworthiness? I always like that idea. There's trust of what I do for you, in giving you trust, but there's trustworthiness of, am I acting in a way, am I dependable, that I am trustworthy? I've demonstrated worth in the trust, and that doesn't.
What do you mean,
get
worth in the trust?
Well, trustworthiness of like, I respond. So when there's an emotional bid, I show up. When you want to talk, I give you my full attention rather than have my eyes on the phone. It can be little behavioral things, but it's like, oh, you're there with me, you're showing up. Those little things add up to then be able to do these more difficult things of navigate chores.
Yeah. The super fun, like sexy part of a marriage, like cleaning toilets together, cleaning up things when kids get sick in the middle of the night.
So let's just that story.
I don't know if people want to hear this, honestly.
So if you're eating, you might need to stop listening right now. Yes, if you have a gag reflux.
Well, let's not go into detail, but every parent will relate to this.
Yes. So
the moment you're really parenting,
you're in this together.
Yeah.
And so one of our kids got sick and
in the night
and disoriented.
Didn't make it to the bathroom.
Couldn't figure out how to open the door. And it was on the door in the shag carpet.
Yeah. And when you're on your knees in a kid's room at 3:00 in the morning, both cleaning up chunks out of a carpet
with a spoon.
I think we actually looked at each other and laughed at one point because we were both like gagging and wanting to cry and go back to bed. Instead, we looked at each other. We're like, "Well,
this is married life. This is parenting.
This is it.
4 a.m. and we have spoons."
Yeah, okay. I said we wouldn't go too much.
I'm not saying what it looked like, but I think that's something, because it could have easily been just one of us doing it, or,
I think we found a rhythm for that too. Like I think we're pretty good in a crisis.
Yeah.
I think it's harder the long-term things, but like the one-off like crisis things, we kind of find our thing. We share it, like we step in together. We found because this happens more than once when you're a parent.
Yeah.
And you would be getting the stuff on the floor. I'm taking the sheets and rinsing them and getting the kid, holding the child. I hold the child, comforting them, cleaning them up.
I was in the fluids.
Yeah.
And it was unspoken, but it works seamlessly. And I think that we're thankful for that. If you're in a partnership where that's not the case, or you're working third shift, so one person has to sleep, the other has to get up and do that, there needs to be communication about like, this isn't expectation or deferring, but it's the rhythm of where we are right now, kind of the inhabiting the season idea. Like, this is just a moment in time, and we had that, and finding the humor in all of it. Like,
I mean,
there's
that's the
things
key.
that we found hilarious that were just, it was either we're going to laugh or cry.
Right.
And sometimes we did both.
Yeah. But being able to laugh at yourselves together is really key.
Yeah.
Not laugh at the other. If they're not laughing, that's not usually good.
No, that usually leads to a fight.
Yeah, but choose, and it's a choice, because there are times it wasn't funny. It didn't feel funny, but it's like, you know what? We got to find what's funny about this.
Find the humor in it.
Find the funny.
Yeah, and we did. The last thing, I think, in terms of chores is there's a challenge in how do we involve our kids in this? So there's the takeaways of having a big picture, being open, being trusting, kind of having the communication about it, finding the funny. And then it's, how do you mentor your kids in
I think
chores?
Honestly, we need a whole other podcast for that, because I might need some help in that area. I don't think I was the greatest.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, so
okay.
Not you.
Give it to me. This is where
both of us. I think not you, but because I think we find it easier. I mean, our kids will say our family motto.
Yeah, no, don't say that.
Is, if you want it done right,
do it yourself.
Do it yourself. And I think we live with a little margin sometimes of tolerating the frustration, like for me, them mowing the lawn. I did learn from my roommate, like vacuuming, there's certain ways that you mow the lawn and certain ways you don't. And so trying to teach my kids and have patience of having it be a mess and look horrible and not be the right way was really, really hard. And so then I would just do it, which communicated the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I think you in different places.
Totally. I would rather just do it myself than wait to try to figure out, if they can do it.
Yeah.
So I don't think I did the best job of that, which we're trying to relearn now that they're in their 20s and living at home.
And we have a behavior chart now.
Reparenting them. Fun for all the family.
Although it is good because our son cooks all the time. We have a personal chef at home.
Yeah.
How many times have we cooked in the last 6 months?
Thank goodness he enjoys that task. I enjoy it too, but he kicks me out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
So that's fine. Yeah. No, I'm proud of them. They've all figured out their own rhythms with what they do, and I can't control what they don't do now. So it's
Yeah.
okay. They're adults.
One last thing with cars, teaching your kids how to drive.
Yeah.
That's a fun chore,
Is that
right?
a question?
Yeah,
Is that a statement?
Which one of us did that better?
If you ask the kids, they all didn't like the times I was teaching them to drive because they say I had white knuckles on the sides of they say I gasped all the time. Not my favorite.
Yeah, no.
Not my favorite.
No. And I managed to do okay, but it was not easy. And so
Yeah.
like that, in our relationship, you're the better driver, but you weren't necessarily the one that could tolerate.
That wanted to teach it.
Yeah, take your life in your own hands and feel like you might
that was
die
stressful.
every moment.
I was glad when that was done.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're partners.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you're glad.
I'm glad that we've.
I'm glad you do the dishes.
Figure out. Yeah, I'm glad to do the dishes, and I think it's finding what you enjoy doing and being willing to offer that as an act of service, but then also figuring out what both of you don't like and how you're going to navigate that together. That leads to flourishing and not bitterness.
Yeah, have the conversation.
Yep, and trial and error. All
Keep
right.
learning.
Keep learning.